All right, so we just took the half-life lab quiz, and now we're working on this half-life worksheet. And the first thing I want to point out is that for number 3 on this side, where it says what % of a sample, cross that problem off. We don't know how to do that type of problem right there. So cross off number 3 on that side. And now I want to actually flip our paper over and do a couple of these practice problems together. So number 1 says, an isotope of cesium, specifically cesium-137, has a half-life of 30 years. That means every 30 years, about half of it disappears, right? If 1 gram of cesium-137 disintegrates over a period of 90 years, how many grams of cesium-137 would we have left? Here's my trick, because every question's a little bit different. You always want to figure out how many half-lives and then use that information appropriately. And the way to figure that out is to find the 2 numbers that have units that match. So do you see how it says 30 years is the half-life and 90 years is the time period they're asking about? See how both of those numbers have the unit years? That's going to be the information that we look for this problem. And so it tells us the half-life is 30 years and wants to know how much is left after 90 years. So how many half-lives happen in 90 years? 3, right? Because 30 years is 1 half-life, 60 years is the second half-life, 90 years is the third half-life. So what's important is that there's going to be 3 half-lives, and that's going to be information we use to solve the problem. The problem says how many grams of cesium remains. And so it says we started with 1 gram. And since it had 3 half-lives, that means we divide it by 2, and divide it by 2, and divide it by 2. You divide it by 2 3 times because it had 3 half-lives. So after 1 half-life, you had about half a gram. After the next half-life, you had about a quarter of a gram. After the last half-life, you had 1/8 of a gram. Does that make sense? So it's about looking at the 2 numbers that have the same unit, figuring out how many half-lives, and applying that accordingly. Let's look at number 4 together. Number 4 says the half-life of isotope X is 2 years. How many years would it take for a 4 milligram sample to decay and have only 0.5 milligrams left? So in this case, I see 4 milligrams and 0.5 milligrams. Those are the 2 numbers that have matching units. So I'm going to use those to figure out how many half-lives have happened. So remember, every time there's a half-life, the amount cuts in what? In half, right? And so, because of that, we need to figure out how many half-lives happen from 4 to 0.5. So what I would do is 4 divided by 2, that equals 2. And now I divide it by 2 again, that's 1. Divided by 2 again, that's 0.5. Oh, look, that's what I wanted to get to. How many times did I divide it by 2? 3 times. So that's 3 half-lives. So I'm going to use that information to answer the question. The question says, how many years did it take? And the question tells us that 1 half-life is 2 years. And we're telling ourselves that 3 half-lives have happened. So how many years have happened? 6, because it becomes 3 half-lives times 2 years equals 6 years is our answer. So Leo, please put your mask on. Please don't make me ask you again. Every problem, we're going to figure out the number of half-lives, and then we're going to apply it accordingly. Okay? So I want you to try these problems. The answers are available on the Zoom and other important links document. And that's what we're working on today. On Thursday, when we see each other, I'm going to have a few more practice problems that we're going to do right at the start of class, and then we're going to have a homework quiz on this material. I also want to remind you that you guys have the nuclear research project, which goes in the test category. Technically, the research is due tomorrow. The Flipgrid is due next week. I've already graded the Flipgrids that have been submitted, and you guys already have your 20 out of 20 in the test category. But don't forget, that is an important assignment that is going to be done outside of class time. So make sure you're doing that. So we're going to spend the rest of the period doing these problems. I do want to mention that number 6, my answer key was rushed and I put the wrong answer on number 6. So I'm going to type that into the Zoom and other important links document. So when I typed information, use the typed information instead of what's written on the picture of the answer key, because I did do number 6 wrong in my rush to get it done this morning. So my Zoomers, you're welcome to stay on or sign off, but the expectation is that you're trying these problems and checking your answers. Bye-bye.